왜 그랬대요?
술래본 갔어. 아, 꼬라지가 갑자기 정말.
그래서 그걸 또 집에까지 좀 끌고 가갖고 마누라
The story begins with a shocking crime scene that immediately establishes the tale's disturbing atmosphere. A couple has been brutally murdered, their bodies arranged in a macabre display surrounded by occult symbols and ritualistic arrangements. Inspector Yong's arrival marks the beginning of an investigation that will spiral into increasingly horrifying revelations. The presence of a blood-soaked man with boils covering his body, sitting calmly outside as if awaiting arrest, immediately sets readers on edge. This opening is particularly effective because it presents a seemingly straightforward mystery, a suspect sitting at the scene of the crime, yet the narrative refuses to follow conventional detective story logic. What makes this setup brilliant is the introduction of the Japanese man, a figure who remains deliberately vague and mysterious. Reports of him eating raw meat from a dead deer in the forest introduce an element of the otherworldly, blurring the line between supernatural horror and psychological thriller. The series of deaths that follow his arrival in the village suggest a connection, yet nothing is explicitly proven, leaving readers suspended in uncertainty alongside Inspector Yong himself. This ambiguity is crucial to the narrative's power, as it mirrors the inspector's own confusion and growing paranoia. The reader becomes complicit in Yong's investigation, sharing his frustrations and fears as supernatural explanations seem increasingly plausible. As the narrative progresses, the horror escalates in creative and disturbing ways. The sudden appearance of a naked woman at the police station, the violent woman discovered in a burning house, and the discovery of victims with mysterious boils all suggest an external, supernatural force at work. The narrative cleverly manipulates both the inspector and the reader through misdirection and carefully planted clues. Each new discovery seems to confirm the existence of supernatural evil operating within the village. Yet the mechanisms by which this evil functions remain opaque and terrifying. The victims exhibit similar symptoms: boils, violent behavior, and a seeming inability to control their actions, suggesting a common source of infection or curse. The introduction of Mongju as an eyewitness provides a turning point in the investigation. However, her sudden disappearance and the revelation of Yong's nightmare, where he witnesses a naked man feasting on a rotting corpse, blur the boundaries between reality and psychological breakdown. This is where the story's genius becomes apparent. It's not merely about investigating a crime, but about watching a man's grip on reality slowly deteriorate under the pressure of fear and confusion. Yong cannot distinguish between what he has genuinely witnessed and what exists only in his increasingly fractured psyche. The nightmare feels so real that it raises questions about whether any of the other supernatural phenomena are genuine or merely manifestations of collective hysteria. Yong's daughter Hojin developing a high fever, combined with the appearance of boils on her feet identical to other victims, transforms this from an external investigation into a deeply personal nightmare. The stakes shift from solving murders to saving his family, and this emotional investment clouds Yong's judgment in ways that will prove catastrophic. A father's love becomes both his greatest strength and his most dangerous vulnerability, making him susceptible to manipulation and poor decision-making. The moment his family becomes threatened, Yong loses his objectivity as an investigator and begins acting from pure emotion and desperation rather than reason and evidence. The middle section introduces a potential resolution through the village exorcist Il Guang. The purification rituals and the spiritual battle between Guang and the Japanese man offer a momentary sense that the supernatural threat might be contained or defeated. Yong's decision to topple the altar, even at the risk of his daughter's suffering, shows a father willing to sacrifice everything to protect his child. However, this apparent victory is merely a mirage. The narrative skillfully uses this false hope to deepen the eventual tragedy, making readers complicit in Yong's false sense of security. We want to believe that the exorcist can save the day, just as Yong does, making the betrayal all the more powerful. The revelation of the disfigured corpse, the original murder suspect transformed into a living zombie by dark rituals, demonstrates what appears to be the Japanese man's sinister, supernatural power. Yet even this shocking revelation pales in comparison to the ultimate truth. Yong's attempted solution, running the Japanese man down with his car and disposing of the body, represents a moral crossing point. The inspector has moved from investigator to perpetrator, driven by desperation and fear. This moment is significant because it shows how the investigation has corrupted Yong's moral foundation. He has become willing to commit murder and cover it up, actions that would have been unthinkable to him before his family's safety was threatened. Yong gathers his trusted friends and colleagues, forming what he believes is a united front against supernatural evil. They search for the Japanese man with weapons, ready for battle. Yet throughout these efforts, the narrative maintains an ambiguity about whether they are actually pursuing a supernatural threat or chasing phantoms created by their own fear and paranoia. The zombie-like man who attacks them could be a genuine supernatural creation or merely a drugged and manipulated individual. The line between reality and delusion has become so blurred that neither Yong nor the reader can be entirely certain what is actually happening. What elevates this narrative from a simple ghost story to a truly chilling tale is its final revelation. The discovery that Il Guang, the trusted exorcist and ally, has been working in conspiracy with the Japanese man all along represents a masterclass in narrative betrayal. Yong's greatest mistake was not his investigation methods or his paranoia, but his trust in the wrong people. Guang was using the situation to extort money from Yong, while the old Japanese man pursued his twisted obsession with collecting photographs of victims and experiencing the fear and blood he craved. The supernatural elements that seemed so terrifying throughout the story become recontextualized as deliberate manipulations designed to control Yong's behavior and extract money from him. This conspiracy fundamentally reframes the entire narrative. The supernatural elements that seemed so terrifying might have been largely psychological manipulation rather than genuine demonic forces. The boils could result from poison carefully administered by Guang. The violent outbursts could be induced through drugging or psychological suggestion. The unexplained deaths could be carefully orchestrated murders staged to appear supernatural. Yong's increasingly paranoid interpretation of events played directly into the conspirators' hands, making him more desperate and more willing to pay for solutions that Guang promised to provide. The most devastating aspect of this tale is its exploration of how misplaced trust and emotional vulnerability can destroy a person completely. Yong had every opportunity to save himself and his family. He possessed the authority, the resources, and the intelligence to uncover the truth. Yet his desperate love for his daughter and his reliance on those he believed were helping him blinded him to the conspiracy unfolding around him. He trusted Guang to save his daughter when Guang was actually orchestrating her suffering as part of a money-making scheme. The exorcist had inserted himself into Yong's life at precisely the moment when the inspector was most vulnerable and desperate. The ending, with Yong's wife and mother-in-law brutally murdered and his daughter witnessing it all, represents the complete destruction of everything he fought to protect. His only child, traumatized by witnessing her mother's death, has been transformed into a vessel of emotional damage. His family is shattered, not by supernatural forces, but by the deliberate cruelty of human beings motivated by greed and obsession. The girl Mongju, who tried to warn him of the truth, was dismissed and disbelieved because she seemed untrustworthy, while the smooth-talking exorcist gained his complete confidence. This narrative serves as a powerful meditation on paranoia, trust, and the fragility of family bonds. It demonstrates how fear can be weaponized, how isolation can be exploited, and how the people we trust most can betray us most completely. The story suggests that sometimes the greatest horrors are not supernatural, but deeply, terrifyingly human. The Japanese man and Il Guang represent a dark collaboration born from their respective obsessions, one seeking blood and fear for psychological gratification, the other seeking money through deception. The tale's final message is sobering. One mistaken judgment, one misplaced trust, can cascade into irreversible tragedy. Yong had every tool at his disposal to prevent the destruction of his family, yet he failed because he could not see beyond the carefully constructed deception surrounding him. This makes the story far more horrifying than any ghost or demon could ever be, reminding us that the most terrifying forces in this world are the calculated evil perpetrated by human beings against one another. The darkness that ultimately consumes Yang's world emerges not from supernatural sources, but from the simple, terrible human capacity for cruelty, manipulation, and exploitation dressed up in false piety and friendship. In the end, the true horror lies not in what was supernatural, but in what was all too human.